All right, so before you was a report, I also would like to acknowledge the board of Regenerate Christchurch and Ivan for your great work, and also staff of Regenerate Christchurch who are in the room. I would have to say that the whole process has been a pleasure. We've worked really collaboratively with DPMC through this, right up to the wire last week to get the transfer agreement through. I want to recognise Ian as well for his input into this. It has been a great piece of work, and I think that it's been as smooth as anyone could have hoped for. So before you today is a report. We did come to you and talk to you through the assets and liabilities transfer agreement. This is essentially required under the Act. It transfers the assets and liabilities from Regenerate Christchurch to the Crown and to Christchurch City Council. You'll see an attachment which is the agreement, which is to be signed by the CEO for Christchurch City, Dawn, Ivan from Regenerate Christchurch, and the CEO of DPMC. That's the Act itself, the Amendment Bill, had its third reading last night, so now we're just waiting for royal assent, which will happen in the next couple of days. The Act comes in to play on the means the Amendment Bill comes on the 30th of June, and as I said before in our previous briefings, that means some of the powers under Regeneration Act will cease, specifically Section 71. So I'm sure you would have read the report. You've probably been across this. We've had a number of briefings, and there's a bit of interest in it. Any questions today? And we'll go through to the resolutions. Any questions?
Any questions from councillors?
It's well organised.
Right. Well, I'll move the resolution then, the recommendations. Do I have a seconder for that? Mike Davidson. Is there any... Well, I'll kick it off because we've been on a bit of a journey, really, and unfortunately, you know, timing, I guess, is everything, and you learn lessons along the way when you're faced with circumstances that you perhaps don't contemplate where they will end up. One of the lessons learned for me from our experience of the earthquakes was when the government came in and set up a government department at the time, you know, of the earthquakes, or after the earthquakes in 2011. The planning for the transition wasn't done right from the start, because when you're bringing something new into a city, I mean, I don't actually personally agree that that's the right way to go, but because you really need to build on what's already there. But from a strategic point of view, you've actually got to be planning for the transition right from the very start, because you've got to see your way through to the next stage. And Sarah sort of came to an abrupt end at a time that we were trying to negotiate a transition through a transitional advisory group, which ultimately had as at its core of its recommendation was a single urban development authority for Christchurch that would have seen us through as a regeneration urban development authority. I guess that what we ended up with was an organisation that put the community back at the heart of the engagement process, which had been missing ever since the blueprint process took over from Share an Idea. Share an Idea was just such a magic way to start, and it got lost. Regenerate Christchurch recaptured the essence of Share an Idea and brought the community to that amazing space, the pathway from our city to our sea, and breathed life into it, a new life into it. And as a former resident of what was called the Red Zone, I, for one, will forever be grateful to Regenerate Christchurch for the leadership that was shown in developing the Otakaro-Avon River corridor. And I don't know whether in my lifetime what I'll see completed, what remains of it. But I know that that is going to be such a legacy for our city. It's going to be a legacy for our region. People will be in awe of what, this incredible space has enabled our city, will enable our city to be able to achieve. We would be facing way more flood management issues if the red zoning hadn't happened. As a city, we will forever be grateful for what has been gifted, really, from the people who used to live there. So I'd like to thank the current members of the board who are here today. Dr. Therese Arsenault for your leadership, chairing the board, Jen Crawford, Bill Dwyer and Hilary Walton. Thank you very much, and thank you for being here. And I acknowledge too Manaia Cunningham, who isn't with us this afternoon, but thank you so much. I've already acknowledged you today, Ivan Yafeta, for holding the pen on the recovery paper that went through this morning, so thank you for your leadership and for your whole team that sits in with you and has sat in with you, and actually all the predecessor members of the boards, those that started off the process and saw it through. It's just it really has been one hell of a journey. So thank you very much for it. And Bill, I should mention you in particular because I think you're one of the originals that sat there as the chair of DCL. I think the government, the minister and I both had the idea that if we put the two chairs of the two boards of the two urban development authorities onto the board of Regenerate Christchurch, then we would get that broader development authority concept in play. But I think we could have done it better in order to really make a big difference. But gosh, thank you for your contribution along the way. We're a better city for the roles that people have played, and I wanted to acknowledge you in particular as well. So thank you all very much, and now I'll hand over to Tim.
Well, just reiterating what Leanne said, but thank you very much to the board for all the work, the difficult times, and you did it extremely well, so thank you. Ivan, I do want to say special thanks to you. Your connection with elected members here and your leadership and your connection was outstanding, and it was very, very well done. So thank you very much for that. And to Julia and the rest of your team, outstanding work. Thank you.
Andrew?
Thank you. It was around about a year ago when the Board of Regenerate Christchurch was refreshed that, and when we wrote a new letter of expectation to that board, that the concept of transition and the desire for a transition plan first started to be talked about. And we always knew that Regenerate Christchurch was needing to transition to an end point that would naturally have been June 2021. But somewhat ambitiously at the time, we talked about June 2020 as a potential end point for this transition work. And I was always very keen to see Regenerate come to an end that was respectful, that was strategically aligned with work that had happened and that needed to happen, and with the capability of other agencies in the city, and in particular receiving agencies that could take on work that Regenerate Christchurch had done or was doing in a way that meant nothing fell off the edge of a cliff at the end of a logical and respectful transition. The fact that we're here today considering this particular paper is evidence that that transition has been planned and executed in a way that I believe is exemplary. I think there's a lot to be learned from what has happened in these last few months in terms of transitioning Regenerate Christchurch to an end point. And I think there's experience that we'll draw on in the future that we've had in these last few months with that transition. I also think that there's significant legacy that Regenerate Christchurch will leave. There's a huge amount of very valuable work been done, which will benefit this city for many, many years into the future. And whilst the life of Regenerate Christchurch in the grand scheme of things may have been short-lived, the value of the work that's been done as what has been achieved will be anything but short-lived. So I'd like to echo the thanks of others to the chair and current board of Regenerate Christchurch, but at the same time I'd like to acknowledge the former chair and previous board members as well, and to the executive and staff. I think some really valuable work has been achieved, significant legacy, and I think the way that the transition has run, as I say, is a very good example of how to bring an organisation to a logical end in a respectful and strategic way. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Yanni?
Thank you. Yeah, I too want to acknowledge the work that people have done within the organisation, and I think it's really interesting that today, as we pass the previous resolutions around the COVID-19 response, to reflect on the Regenerate Christchurch. In fact, when it was established, as part of my personal submission, I quoted Theodore Roosevelt, who said, "I believe that the more you know about the past, the better you are prepared for the future." And I think it's quite apt that today we're actually looking forward, learning some of the lessons. Unfortunately, as part of my submission, I raised the concern around the lack of clarity over purpose, the no clear funding mechanisms to achieve its goals, and it added the possibility of duplication and more red tape. And I think on reflection, really unfortunately, those risks came true. Take Cathedral Square, for example, the huge amount of money spent on planning for Cathedral Square without any funding mechanism to ensure that that vision happened. So personally, I feel like we've wasted a lot of money and a lot of time and resource and not made a lot of progress, when actually what we needed to do was simplify the arrangements and let the council get on and do the things that it had done traditionally for the last 100 to 150 years in the city, such as building playgrounds or building roads or building parks. And I don't think it's fair to put the blame on Regenerate Christchurch as an organisation. I think it's incumbent on us at a governance level to take responsibility for the things that we established and for the way in which we gave direction or not. I think the final reflection would be that in terms of looking forward, is we need to learn that while some areas of the city have regenerated, there's other areas that are degenerated quite rapidly since this organisation was established. And I think really going forward with the COVID-19 response, learning from what happened with Regenerate, let's ensure that every part of the city, and especially those who need extra support or those that are suffering the most, get the most support rather than the least. So areas like Phillipstown, areas like Linwood that I represent, there is a clear case, I think, for a much more targeted approach to helping and supporting those communities. So I thank the organisation for the work that they've done. I think this is not, this couldn't come soon enough in my view. I think reducing Regenerate Christchurch to what we're seeing in terms of the transition is a positive step forward. I wish it had happened sooner, but we are where we are today. And the key thing is to keep going with what we're doing. Thank you.
All right, I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say
Aye.
no.